I want to give a special shout out to all my patrons first. Thank you so much to my Bibliospren, Bibliohowlers, and my Bibliomancers. It means a lot to me that you give me your extra support for my passion and hobby. Hi everyone, Petrik here. So for today's video, this will be again, just like last month's video, this will be about 7 amazing fantasy and this time sci-fi as well. 7 amazing science fiction and fantasy series that I think are worth pushing through the first book. Same as the thing that I mentioned in my previous video about this topic, which surprisingly did really well for my YouTube channel. I don't know whether it will do really well again this time, but hopefully it will. But anyway, as I mentioned in that video, I think I can safely say for everyone that when we read a book, we definitely want to enjoy it. When we try reading a series, I think I can safely say that all of us want to be able to enjoy it. But sometimes, no matter how loved a series is, whether it's fantasy, sci-fi, or other genre, sometimes a book just doesn't click with us. Sometimes the series just doesn't click with us. And because of that, the purpose of this video is to convince you to give the series a try until a particular volume. Before deciding, you have to give it up. Because speaking from my experience, none of us are immortals and we have so many books that we want to read. And probably, unfortunately, a single lifetime will not be enough for us to read all the books that we want to read. So we have to cut our loss with some series, no matter how loved they are. So today I will be talking about 7 series. Let's start from one of my personal favorites of all time, and that is the Dandelion Dynasty by Ken Liu. Out of all the series mentioned on today's video, this is probably the least popular one. This and the next one that I'm going to be talking about, but the rest, they will be popular series. So for the Dandelion Dynasty, this is a quartet. The first book is The Grace of Kings, the second book is The Wall of Storms, and then the third and the fourth book is The Veiled Throne, and finally Speaking Bones. I personally love every book in the series. It is one of my top favorite series of all time, and a lot of people mention they dislike reading The Grace of Kings. And I honestly cannot fault them too much about this, especially when the reason is because they cannot connect with the characters, and the middle section of The Grace of Kings sometimes felt a bit dragging in the plotline and the pacing. I definitely felt the middle portion of The Grace of Kings had a bit of a slowdown compared to the first part and also the last part of the book. But I really loved The Grace of Kings, especially after I managed to finish the second book in the series, The Wall of Storms. So if you are someone who feel like there were a lot of criticisms toward the first book, The Grace of Kings, do notice that The Grace of Kings is completely different compared to the rest of the series. The Grace of Kings kind of worked like a long prologue to the Dandelion Dynasty, and the main content of the series, even though The Grace of Kings actually has so many events happening in the book, but the main content, the main meat of the Dandelion Dynasty is in The Wall of Storms, The Veiled Throne, and Speaking Bones. So I recommend this. If you are reading the Dandelion Dynasty for the first time and you felt a bit lukewarm about The Grace of Kings, I still would highly recommend you to at least check out the second book, The Wall of Storms. The Wall of Storms was my favorite book last year, and to this day, this is still the best second book of a series I have read since Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. I think this is an epic fantasy masterpiece, and from my perspective, all the popular criticisms regarding the first book, The Grace of Kings, were completely gone in The Wall of Storms. It is amazing, the character development was spectacular, and the events that happen, let's just say that it has everything I want in an epic fantasy novel. Love this one very much. So if you are reading the Dandelion Dynasty for the first time, try to read until you finish the second book. If you still do not click with Wall of Storms, then feel free to drop the series. I do not think The Veiled Throne and Speaking Bones will be for you if you do not like reading The Wall of Storms. And the second series I want to recommend here is War for the Rose Throne series by Peter McLean. This is one of my favorite grimdark series, and a lot of people have mentioned that Priest of Bones was too similar to Peaky Blinders. And yes, I will not deny that. It felt really similar to Peaky Blinders Season 1. But the entire series, the first-person narration of Thomas Piety is one of the most unique and distinct narration style I have ever read in any book, any series. This is the kind of series where it felt like the author has turned into a messenger for the main character to tell their story. And yes, that's what I felt with Thomas Piety in the War for the Rose Throne series. So if you felt like the first book, Priest of Bones, was too similar to Peaky Blinders, and you're not sure about the rest of the series, I recommend you to pick up the second book, at least, Priest of Lies. I think Priest of Lies is one of the best books in the entire series. It is up there with the final book, Priest of Crowns. So just like the Dandelion Dynasty, if you decided to read War for the Rose Throne, and after reading Priest of Lies you still feels lukewarm about everything, then yeah, feel free to drop the series. That said, I will recommend this. I will say this. I actually appear in the third book of the series, Priest of Gallows, and if you want to see me being killed off brutally, well, this is your chance. I was completely surprised by that, and I am pleasantly happy about it. It's so cool seeing me being included as a cameo appearance to be killed off by the author. And yeah, I think that is awesome. And then the third fantasy series I'm going to recommend is Legends of the First Empire by Michael J. Sullivan. This is a 6-book series and it takes place thousands of years before the events of the Rhyria books, which consisted of 2 series so far, the Rhyria Revelations and the Rhyria Chronicles. So Legends of the First Empire is a long prequel to the Rhyria books. And for this one, if you feel a bit lukewarm about the first book, Age of Myth, and also the second book, Age of Swords, which I had a lot of issue with, I think Age of Swords is the weakest book of the entire series. There were some aspects and elements about the advancing technology in that book that definitely did not feel too suitable for the narrative, in my opinion. I felt like everything happened too fast. So if you are attempting to read Legends of the First Empire and you feel a bit lukewarm about Age of Myth and Age of Swords, that's completely okay. I did feel the same way. So I highly recommend you to read the series up to the third book of the series, Age of War. This one, the third book of the series, is the conclusion to the first half of the Legends of the First Empire, and I think this is the best of the entire series. The best out of all the books in the Legends of the First Empire. After this one, the series started to take a completely different kind of storytelling and direction, and I am honestly not sure whether they will click with a lot of fantasy readers or not. Of course, Michael J. Sullivan has a lot of die-hard fans, and I think in comparison, statistically, the second half definitely clicked with more readers than not. But I did not really feel too satisfied with reading the 5th and the 6th book of the series, Age of Death and Age of Empire. I think I had a really high expectation when it comes to ending because I absolutely loved the ending of Rhyria Revelations, but this one definitely disappointed me a bit. But many readers have voiced that it is very satisfying for them as well. So if you are reading this for the first time, I highly recommend you to pick up the series until Age of War, and if you still do not like reading Age of War, then drop the rest of the series. If you dislike Age of War, I really don't think the second half will convince you to love the series. And now I'm going to talk about 2 sci-fi series before I go back to talk about fantasy again. And of course, I will have to mention one of my top favorite series of all time, and it is Red Rising Saga by Pierce Brown. So even to this day, I still see many people mentioning that the first book, Red Rising, really feels like YA dystopian novel that is hugely inspired by Hunger Games. Look, if you feel that way, I cannot blame you, because I do honestly think that Red Rising was definitely inspired by Hunger Games on plenty of aspects. I do disagree that it is a YA dystopian novel, because I definitely did not feel that. I think the writing felt very adult and mature, but again, that's just my opinion. On top of that, many people have mentioned that the first book did not feel very space opera or sci-fi, and again, they are not completely wrong about this. So I urge readers, every time they want to read Red Rising Saga, to read up to Golden Sun, the second book in Red Rising Saga, or the first trilogy. I try to not recommend trilogy in this kind of video because, well, if you manage to finish the second book, of course you will want to finish the third book to complete the trilogy. But Red Rising Saga has turned into a 7-book series. And yes, the second series do follow the main characters of the first trilogy very closely. It is still their story, so it has really become a 7-book series instead of a trilogy. And I think Golden Sun is a really turning point for the Red Rising Saga. If you read the Golden Sun and you still feel lukewarm and you still do not like the series, the overall tone of the series, then it will be very difficult for the rest of the series to convince you to like it. But I personally love the Golden Sun very much. I used to think this was the best book of the entire series up to Dark Age, but on reread, I consider Morning Star to be the best book of the entire series so far. Morning Star is the third book in the Red Rising Saga. So yeah, back to the point, if you are reading this for the first time, try to make your way up to finishing Golden Sun. It has one of the most brutal ending I have ever read, and I hope you will love the series. I think it is an awesome series. I cannot wait to read the 6th book, Lightbringer, next month. And series number 5 I'm going to recommend today is The Expanse by James S.A. Corey. This is a space opera series. Based on what I've heard, the first book, Leviathan Wakes, some readers definitely bounced off from that. But for this one, this is a 9-book series. So yeah, it is quite a commitment. I consider this a great space opera series, but I love Red Rising Saga more. I think when we compare the TV show adaptation of The Expanse compared to the books, if I have to choose, I will actually choose the TV show adaptation. But again, the books are great too. So if you are reading this for the first time, try to make your way up to the 2nd book, Caliban's War. Caliban's War, in my opinion, is one of the best books in the series, and it is a huge upgrade to Leviathan Wakes, which was good, but it did not feel too amazing in my opinion. But the 2nd book started to include more perspective from Avasarala, one of the best characters in sci-fi, and I think it is just entirely a huge step up compared to Leviathan Wakes. So my recommendation is to at least read up to Caliban's War before deciding that the series is not for you. But on top of that, I also want to add a new addition here, a new point to talk about here. If you feel that the 3rd book, Abaddon's Gate, which I consider to be the weakest book of the entire series, or maybe the 4th book, Cibola Burn, which many other readers consider to be the weakest book of the entire series. If you feel that the 3rd or the 4th book was disappointing, try to read up to Nemesis Games. Nemesis Games is the 5th book in the entire series, and this is one of the best books in the entire series. If you somehow manage to make your way up to Nemesis Games and you still feel like, you know what, this series might not be for me, then you are probably right. I do not think the 2nd half of The Expanse will be able to transform you into a die-hard fans of The Expanse series. So yeah, depending on your experience, because every reader's experience and opinion are subjective, try to read The Expanse up to Caliban's War, the 2nd book in the series, or Nemesis Games. I can quite confidently say that if you do not like reading Nemesis Games, I think the rest of the series will not be for you. We still have 2 more series to talk about here, and the next one I want to recommend is actually an urban fantasy. If there's any series that belongs in this category, it is definitely the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. So far, it is 17 books long, and there are plenty of short stories and collection of short stories in the series. So for the Dresden Files, I approach this one being advised, do not think of the first 3 books as a sign of the quality of the rest of the series, and I will have to maintain this notion because it is so damn true. The first 3 books are some of the weakest books in the entire series, especially the 2nd book, Fool's Moon. It was really bad. Fool's Moon was really bad. It was incredibly disappointing, and if I did not know that the rest of the series would be a huge upgrade, I would have probably DNF'd the series right after I finished reading Fool's Moon. But do not do that. Try to make your way up to the 4th book of the series, Summer Night. I know that reading 3 books first before you get to really enjoy the series sounds a bit, well, it sounds like a big commitment, but the Dresden Files, especially for the first half of the series, the books are really short. Each book can be considered relatively short, and I think you can get through each one of them pretty quickly. Now, once you manage to reach Summer Night, you might still think that this is good, but it hasn't convinced me that this is an amazing series. Well, I have one more checkpoint for you to get to, and that is the 7th book of the series, That Beat. That Beat is where the series started to become something amazing for me, and the rest of the series, every book in the series after that, none of them goes below the 4 stars rating for me. So yeah, if you manage to read the Dresden Files up to the 7th book, That Beat, and you do not like That Beat, then I think you should cut your loss here. Just drop the series there. If by the 7th book, That Beat, you still do not like reading the Dresden Files, I do not think I can convince you to pick up the series up to Changes, book number 12 of the series, which is one of the best books in the entire series. But again, That Beat. Yeah, that is the checkpoint. If you still do not like the Dresden Files by then, I think just drop reading the entire series. But yeah, if you're going to attempt reading the Dresden Files, try to persevere through the first 3 books. And we have finally arrived at the last series on this list, and hey, we have a guest here. Tada! Chocoboy want to recommend you to read The Realm of the Elderlings by Robin Hobb. So The Realm of the Elderlings by Robin Hobb is a 16-book series divided into 5 series, and this series consists of 4 trilogies and 1 quartet. A Farseer trilogy, Lifeship Traders, and then a Tawny Man trilogy, and then the Rainwild Chronicles quartet, and finally the Fates and the Fool trilogy. So if you are reading the Realm of the Elderlings for the first time, and then you read Assassin's Apprentice, the first book, you felt a bit disappointed about it, then do not worry about it, okay? I liked Assassin's Apprentice, but it is, compared to the rest of the series, excluding Rainwild Chronicles Quartet, I think it is one of the weakest book of the series. Royal Assassin is a step up from Assassin's Apprentice. Royal Assassin is the second book in the Realm of the Elderlings, so that's a good sign. But Assassin's Quest was a hugely disappointing book for me. So if you're reading Farseer trilogy and if you feel the same way about me and you feel super disappointed in Assassin's Quest, I have to say something here. Please do not give up with the series first, because I think Chocoboy can actually agree with me that the series do gets better from there. So much more. So you have 2 options here. If you want to read the continuation of Fates trilogy immediately, you can read Fool's Errand, the first book in Tawny Man trilogy. But chronologically and based on my recommendation, it is better for you to read the Lifeship Traders trilogy first. Not only Lifeship Traders is the second best series in the entire Realm of the Elderlings, I also think that it is very important for you to read Lifeship Traders first, because many events in this one do play a part in the rest of the series, especially in the final book of the entire Realm of the Elderlings. So ultimately, my recommendation, if you are reading the Realm of the Elderlings for the first time, try to make your way, whether you decide to read Lifeship Traders trilogy or not, try to make your way up to the first book in the Tawny Man trilogy, Fool's Errand. This was the first book in the series where I gave it a full 5 out of 5 stars rating. And yes, before that, the previous 6 books, including Lifeship Traders, none of them actually received a full 5 out of 5 stars rating from me. This was the first time, Fool's Errand. And if you manage to make your way up to Fool's Errand and you still think that, you know what, this is not good, this series is not for you, then you are most likely right about it. I do not think the remaining 9 books of the series will be able to transform you into a Robin Hobb fans, and that's completely okay. Even if you do not like all the 7 series I just mentioned today, it's totally okay. Again, as I said in the beginning of this video, everyone's opinion and experience are different, and all of them are valid. So yeah, my recommendation, if you are attempting the Realm of the Elderlings for the first time, one of my top favorite series of all time, make sure to read up to Fool's Errand before deciding to call it quit. So yeah, that's pretty much the end of today's video. And just like my previous video on this one, again, this is just my recommendation and it is my opinion. Hopefully this video will be helpful to you if you are reading this 7 series for the first time. I think they are awesome fantasy and sci-fi series, and I hope many of you will love them. As you can probably guess, none of the series I mentioned in today's video and also the previous video, none of the series I mentioned are trilogies. So if I make another video on this, well, it will probably be on the topic of fantasy or sci-fi trilogies. So yeah, do let me know what you think about my video today, and do let me know which fantasy or sci-fi series do you think belong in this category. I hope you enjoyed watching the video, and as always, thank you so much for watching and thank you for your support. Bye bye. Lastly, I want to say thank you so much once again to all my patrons who keep on supporting me.